Clearly, nobody's been listening to what Senator McCain and I have been saying for the last 3 years. We said train the Free Syrian Army so they can take this fight on. Instead of training the Free Syrian Army, the president overruled his entire national security team and abandoned the Free Syrian Army. We're talking about an army now, not an organization. 31,000 is the best guess. Territory in Iraq and Syria the size of Indiana, and for anybody to suggest that we can do this with air power alone, or this is like Yemen and Somalia, is disingenuous and delusional.
All right, folks, there you go. And joining us now is Michael Rubin, resident scholar at the American Enterprise Institute, senior lecturer at the Naval Postgraduate School Center for Civil Military Relations, and author of the great book, Dancing with the Devil, The Perils of Engaging Rogue Regimes. Hello, Michael.
Hey, Steve, how are you?
I'm fine. You wrote a great piece, commentarymagazine.com, about what is and what is not Islamic, and that is based on the president telling all of us when he gave his speech last week that ISIL, or as he puts it, says that they're Islamic and they're a state, and they're not either Islamic or a state. And I've talked about the fact that if ISIL or ISIS isn't Islamic, based on Obama's definition about religion, that no religion would condone killing innocents, then he's also saying no, none of the terrorist groups. Not one Islamic terrorist group is Islamic because they all fit the same definition as ISIS. But you agree with that, I believe, but you take in your piece several steps further.
Well, I certainly agree with that. We shouldn't sacrifice national security on the altar of political correctness. But what really drives me nuts, and I say this as someone who spent 14 years in a Quaker school, is so many progressives are so quick to jump on the separation of church and state, and yet don't say a word when the president stands up and deigns to say what religion is and is not, tries to define and act as an authority on Islam or Christianity or Judaism. It has absolutely no place. What really worries me about this, however, is it shows that President Obama wants to remain willfully blind about the ideology which drives the Islamic State.
Absolutely, because in any war, I'm no general, I've never put on the uniform, but I would assume, you know, knowing your enemy, understanding your enemy, not only from a strategic point when it comes to military readiness and preparedness and strategy, but also knowing what drives them, knowing who they are. And you can't convince me, Michael, nobody could convince me that this president doesn't understand what radical Islam is and what terrorists are all about. He just doesn't want to offend the Muslim world anymore. And he took it a step further. He said that if we did go in, he said this Saturday in his address, that if we do go in with ground forces and do go in with a ground war and put our military might on display, we're only going to make more terrorists and make more enemies and create more radicals. So, you know, it's all about political correctness here.
Well, it absolutely is. And it gets even worse, Steve. I mean, when you have the Islamic Society of North America, a group which apologizes for the Muslim Brotherhood, which accepted donations from Qatar to build its headquarters in Indiana, when you have that group appointed to credential American Muslim military chaplains, that's like putting the Taliban in charge of writing the counterinsurgency manual. We've let political correctness go all awry. But when we're going back to Syria and Iraq and the Islamic State, what really worries me is while President Obama always came into office claiming to be the most transparent president, in effect, he's only transparent with our enemies, telling them exactly what we will and won't do when we fight them.
And you know, you wrote, one of the great lines from your piece is that for all practical purposes, religion is what its practitioners believe it to be, not what an American president says it is. And that sums it up as eloquently as I could possibly imagine. Because to say, oh, that's not Islam, or that's not Judaism, or that's not Christianity, if the practicers, you know how many variations of Judaism there are? I'm not saying that there's any violent, variations of it, thank God, but and variations of Christianity that fall under the Christianity umbrella. Well, then why is the president out there saying this can't be Islam when to the millions of practitioners of it, it is?
Well, you're absolutely right there, Steve. Look, as you know, I have my PhD in Iranian history, for which I had to take several different classes and study for years Islamic theology. And I understand the theory of the theology. I understand the history of exegesis, the history of the evolution of theological discourse. But the theory is meaningless. You throw it out the window when you are putting troops in the field. You have to deal with what the practitioners believe rather than what an Ivy League professor says. And that's one of the first mistakes we make. When we train our Department of Justice, or when we train our troops going into harm's way, whether they're protecting American national security abroad, or in the case of the FBI, protecting us at home, we need them to understand what the radicalism is, not pretend that Islam is like some version of My Little Pony, which is all just unicorns and pink rainbows.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, let me ask you this, Michael. Dancing with the Devil, the perils of engaging rogue regimes. You know, there's been a lot of talk that we should partner up with Iran in this fight against ISIS. And there's a lot of fear that this partnering up, if it happens, or cooperation in front of the scenes, behind the scenes, will serve to further allow this president of ours to give Iran a pass on their nuclear program.
Well, you know, Steve, it looks like that already happened, or that was the intention. The Iranian press is reporting that Secretary of State John Kerry asked Iran to coordinate, and Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, who calls himself the deputy of the Messiah on earth, slapped down John Kerry, slapped down Obama, humiliated us in the process. But let's face it, to partner with Iran and defeat ISIS might seem smart in the short term, but it's simply swapping one flavor of terrorism with another. Just because we and Iran have an interest in defeating ISIS doesn't mean we're on the same side any more than a firefighter and an arsonist are on the same side of fighting a fire.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Michael, it's always insightful and great to talk to you, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Steve.
All right, Michael Rubin, ladies and gentlemen. It is a bad situation. And when you talk about who's in charge of putting clerics in prisons, and when you talk about the infiltration and influence of the Muslim Brotherhood, as Michelle Bachmann talked about with us last week in Washington on Capitol Hill, we are just, lighting a fuse. And of course, Michael's great book, Dancing with the Devil, The Perils of Engaging Rogue Regimes. You see it there on your wonderful screen, ladies and gentlemen. All right, we're going to come back with the director of the Critical Threats Project at the American Enterprise Institute, Fred Kagan, right after the break. But first, stay tuned for your Newsmax Now update.